Close your eyes for a second. Imagine standing in front of the mirror. You look strong, lean, energized. But more than that, you feel in control. You're not on a crash diet. You're not starving. You're not overtraining. You're simply aligned with your body and your mind. But the question is, how do you get there? How do you burn fat and at the same time build muscle without destroying your relationship with food? Here's the truth. No one tells you. You don't need to suffer. You need to understand. Because fat loss and muscle gain aren't opposites. They're processes on the same road, driven by one engine: nutrition. Let me ask you something. Have you ever eaten clean for weeks? Yet your body barely changes. Or you crush workouts, but still feel soft, sluggish, stuck. That's not your genetics. That's your fuel system, MISFIRING. Because food isn't just calories, it's information. What you eat tells your body what to burn, what to build, and what to store. And here's where it gets powerful. When you eat with precision, you flip the internal switch that tells your body, torch the fat, keep the muscle, let's go. Here's the science behind it. To lose fat, you need a calorie deficit. To build muscle, you need protein synthesis. Sounds conflicting, right? But the magic lies in timing, quality, and consistency. Your body is smarter than you think. When you feed it the right nutrients at the right time, it adapts like a machine, burning what's unnecessary, reinforcing what's essential. Think of your metabolism like a sculptor. Every meal you eat hands it a tool. It can carve, it can shape, but only if you choose the right tools. Not ultra-restriction, not junk, but strategy. Let me tell you how it plays out. You wake up, not reaching for sugar, but hydration and protein. That signals your body to wake up metabolically. You're not just eating, you're activating. Midday your meals are balanced. Protein, fiber, healthy fats. You're not chasing fullness, you're sustaining clarity. That's not just lunch. That's a performance meal, and when you train, whether it's 20 minutes or an hour, you're not breaking your body down. You're telling it, grow here, strengthen here, remove what's not needed. Asterisk the process of changing your body. Composition, losing fat and gaining muscle, is often portrayed as a binary game, as if you can only do one or the other and never both. But this is a misunderstanding of how the human body actually works. At the foundation of this dual pursuit is nutrition. Not just what you eat, but how your body interprets food as a signal, not merely a source of energy or calories. Every bite you take is communicating with your cells, with your hormones, with your nervous system. That communication shapes whether your body is in a catabolic or anabolic state, whether it's storing fat or burning it, whether it's preserving muscle or breaking it down. So when we say that nutrition alone can transform body composition, we're not speaking metaphorically, we're speaking physiologically. And the science is clear. Your body is an adaptive system. It's responding in real time to what you give it. The key player in fat loss is energy balance. That is, consuming fewer calories than you expend over time. But energy balance doesn't exist in isolation. It's tied to nutrient density, macronutrient distribution, satiety signaling, blood, glucose regulation, and hormonal rhythms. If you create a caloric deficit but disregard these other levers, your body may indeed lose weight, but it might also sacrifice lean tissue, drop metabolic rate, or elevate hunger hormones, like ghrelin, in ways that lead to eventual weight regain. But if you create a deficit while intelligently supplying your body with the nutrients it needs, especially sufficient protein, you can shift the balance in your favor. You can encourage fat loss while protecting muscle mass. That's not just preference, that's precision. The second pillar is muscle protein synthesis, the process by which the body builds new muscle tissue. This isn't simply a matter of lifting weights. Resistance training creates the stimulus, the signal to grow. But nutrition provides the materials. Without adequate protein, specifically the amino acid leucine in high-quality protein sources, the signal has nothing to work with, and without energy availability, Even if modest, muscle growth becomes limited. But when you supply the system with sufficient protein at regular intervals, like ideally around 3 to 5 servings per day, spaced evenly, you create conditions where your body is constantly toggling between fat oxidation and muscle synthesis. That toggle isn't a contradiction, it's a rhythm, a metabolic dance between catabolism and anabose. Timing matters. The body is governed by circadian biology, feeding in alignment with your biological daytime, particularly consuming the bulk of calories earlier in the day when insulin sensitivity is higher, and cortisol follows its natural diurnal curve, can support more efficient nutrient partitioning. In simple terms, your body handles calories better when you're active, alert, and metabolically primed. Late-night eating, in contrast, tends to skew energy storage toward fat due to blunted insulin response, altered leptin signaling, and reduced resting energy expenditure. So just as light affects the brain's perception of time, food affects the body's metabolic clock. Understanding this helps align behavior with biology. There's also the role of satiety, your body's natural fullness signals. When you prioritize high-protein, high-fiber meals, you activate gut peptides like peptide Y, GLP-1, and cholecystokin, all of which send strong feedback to the hypothalamus, reducing hunger and delaying the return of appetite. These aren't just interesting molecules, they're levers. And if you can pull them consistently through food choices, you change your relationship with hunger itself. You stop relying on willpower. You begin relying on internal cues that work with you, not against you. And then there's psychological consistency. Most people fail not because the science is flawed, but because their system for implementation is chaotic. They chase extremes. They undereat drastically, overtrain, or overcomplicate meal plans. The nervous system interprets these inconsistencies as stress. Chronically elevated cortisol impairs thyroid function, alters glucose metabolism, increases abdominal fat storage, and disrupts sleep further, reinforcing poor metabolic outcomes. But when you apply a system based on steady, nutrient-rich meals, mindful eating windows, and enough caloric intake to support recovery, the brain feels safe. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis settles. You stop fighting against your own biology. In fact, many people who struggle with body composition aren't undertrained, they're under-recovered. And nutrition is the first place to look. Every time you eat, you're affecting the autonomic nervous system. Meals rich in high glycemic carbohydrates, particularly without protein or fiber, create insulin spikes and crashes. These fluctuations shift you towards sympathetic dominance, more anxiety, more cravings, less energy stability. In contrast, a balanced meal with protein, fiber, and moderate carbohydrates creates a smooth glycemic response, supporting parasympathetic activity, improved mood, better digestion, and more stable energy. And energy stability is the baseline for behavioral consistency. You're more likely to follow through on your habits when your brain isn't chasing the next dopamine spike or sugar hit. The role of hydration also intersects here. Even slight dehydration can impair cellular function, reduce exercise performance, and elevate perceived effort, which reduces training volume indirectly, reducing the signal for muscle preservation or growth. Electrolyte balance, particularly sodium and potassium, also governs nerve firing, muscle contraction, and nutrient transport. So nutrition is not limited to food. It's also fluid. When you zoom out, what becomes clear is that your body doesn't operate in separate compartments. Fat burning, muscle growth, hunger, mood, performance, they're all threads of the same fabric. Nutrition is the thread that weaves them together. And every time you choose a meal that's protein-centered, fiber-rich, portion-controlled, and aligned with your circadian rhythm, you are participating in a biological feedback loop that shifts your body composition over time. The results don't come in a week. They emerge from consistency, from creating metabolic predictability, from sending the same signal repeatedly until the body trusts it enough to adapt. That's not an overnight transformation. That's neuroplasticity, That's hormonal recalibration. That's mitochondria growing more efficient at burning fat for fuel. That's muscle fibers becoming more responsive to amino acids. That's the brain learning that it no longer needs to binge, because nourishment is steady, reliable, and sustainable. So when we say nutrition alone can change your body, we're not exaggerating. We're referring to the deep, systemic way. Food affects every major organ system. How it modulates gene expression, microbiome composition, neurotransmitter synthesis. How it teaches your body to shift from survival to optimization, from craving to clarity, from fatigue to focus, and how over time that shift becomes your new baseline, your new normal. Not just a temporary goal, but a permanent way of operating. Driven not by restriction, but by intelligence, by alignment with your biology, by ownership of your internal state. And that ownership begins with the next meal, the next choice, the next signal you send. The reason most people struggle with fat loss and muscle gain isn't lack of effort, it's lack of clarity. They're doing the work, showing up at the gym, trying to eat better, but their nutrition isn't calibrated. It's reactive, emotional, inconsistent, and at a biological level, the body interprets inconsistency as stress. This is where the nervous system gets involved. When your behaviors send mixed signals, undereating one day, overeating the next, loading up on carbs without structure, skipping protein, you confuse your brain and your metabolism. And in that confusion, your body defaults to protection, storing energy as fat, conserving muscle tissue, dampening performance. This is not failure. This is a lack of alignment between intention and biology. What we're talking about is precision. That's the game changer. It's not about obsessing over every calorie. It's about understanding what signals you're sending and how your physiology responds. The moment you realize that nutrition is a language and your body is always listening, everything changes. The language of food communicates with hormone systems, with energy pathways, with muscle repair processes, and with the brain centers that regulate motivation, mood, and appetite. You're not just eating to survive. You're eating to guide, to direct, to signal. When you structure your meals in a way that supports both fat oxidation and muscle protein synthesis, you create what researchers refer to as favorable nutrient partitioning. This means your body is more likely to send calories toward muscle repair rather than fat storage. Protein is central to this, not just in quantity, but in timing and quality. A consistent intake of high-leucine protein sources, whey or precise plant-based combinations, stimulates mTOR pathways responsible for muscle building. That same protein, when paired with adequate fiber and healthy fats, also modulates GLP-1 and PYY, the gut-brain hormones that tell you you've had enough to eat. This isn't about willpower. It's about neurochemistry. When you eat in a way that stabilizes blood glucose and satisfies nutrient needs, the brain no longer panics about scarcity. Cortisol drops. Insulin sensitivity improves. The hypothalamus recalibrates, and your around food begins to shift. Cravings don't disappear, but they soften. They stop screaming. And when they do speak, you're able to respond with awareness instead of reactivity. That moment where biology and behavior intersect, that's where the transformation happens. Because now you're not fighting against your body, you're working with it, you're guiding it with precision, with strategy. And your body responds by doing what it's designed to do. Adapt. The adaptive process is constant. Every time you sleep, move, eat, or think, your physiology shifts. Muscle growth is not linear. Fat loss is not linear. But when you feed the system consistently and provide the right environmental inputs, the trend becomes predictable. And that predictability is what allows you to stay consistent long enough to see results. Think of it like training a neural pathway. Every time you choose a structured, nutrient-dense meal, you reinforce a behavior loop that leads to more effective energy use. You're not just reducing calories, you're creating a pattern. You're hardwiring decision-making circuits in the prefrontal cortex. You're regulating emotional eating impulses in the limbic system. You're building a system of regulation that allows for flexibility without collapse. What most people overlook is that the act of eating is a full body signal. The taste receptors on your tongue send information to the brainstem. The stretch receptors in your stomach send signals to the vagus nerve. Insulin release from the pancreas communicates with the hypothalamus. All of these signals converge on the brain's reward circuitry, particularly the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area. These areas govern motivation, craving, and reinforcement. If you flood them with sugar and hyperpalatable foods, they adapt, tracing the baseline for pleasure, reducing sensitivity to natural rewards. But if you anchor your nutrition in real, whole, minimally processed foods, those same circuits begin to reset. Dopamine spikes become less erratic. Serotonin synthesis in the gut improves. You become more emotionally resilient, more focused, more in tune with your hunger signals. This is why nutrition alone can be transformative. Because it doesn't just sculpt the body, it recalibrates the brain. And when the brain is aligned with the body, behavior becomes sustainable. You don't need motivation, you need rhythm. You need repeatable systems that reduce friction between knowing and doing. Let's break this down into internal logic. Your body requires energy, yes, but it also requires information. Every nutrient you consume is a signal. Protein triggers repair and satiety. Fiber slows digestion, lowers glycemic load, and feeds beneficial gut microbes. Fats support hormone production, brain health, and membrane fluidity. Carbohydrates, especially from whole sources, fuel glycogen stores and support thyroid function. But when these macronutrients are imbalanced to little protein, too much processed carb, erratic fat intakes, the system becomes dysregulated. You start chasing energy instead of stabilizing it. And the more you chase, the more you fall behind. The right structure prevents that. For example, consuming 30 to 40 grams of protein within the first hour of waking does more than curb hunger. Sets your metabolic tone for the day. It increases thermogenesis, supports neurotransmitter production, and initiates muscle preservation signaling. Pair that with fiber vegetables, seeds, low glycemic fruits, and you anchor blood glucose. That means more stable energy, more focused cognition, and less reactive eating later in the day. Midday meals should be built for function, not just fullness. Think lean protein, cruciferous vegetables, healthy fats, moderate carbs, if active. This supports your circadian cortisol rhythm, which naturally tapers in the afternoon. By feeding the system cleanly, you reduce metabolic burden and preserve clarity. Evening nutrition matters, too. Eating too late, or eating high-fat, high meals late at night, disrupts sleep architecture, reduces growth hormone secretion, and impairs recovery. But small, protein-rich, fiber-supported meals allow for repair without overstimulation. Again, it's not about restriction, it's about resonance with your biology. What emerges from this is a sense of control, not in a rigid, obsessive way, but in a grounded, physiological way. Your choices start to feel like alignment, not sacrifice. You begin to notice that your workouts feel stronger, that your mood stabilizes, that your sleep deepens. These are signs that the internal system is synchronizing, that the body is no longer in a defensive mode, storing fat as a protective buffer. It's in an adaptive mode, burning excess energy, building lean mass, optimizing hormone signals. This is the essence of transformation. Not dramatic shifts overnight, but cellular decisions accumulating day after day. Every meal is a message. Every bite is a vote for the person you're becoming. And when you structure your nutrition to send the right messages, when you feed your body to support function, not just appearance, your physiology changes. Your psychology changes, and the changes last. That's why nutrition alone, when done with clarity, can alter not just your body, but your life. It becomes the foundation upon which all other efforts, training, recovery, mindset, can rest. It's not just fuel, it's feedback, it's focus. It's the signal that tells your body what direction to move in, and the system that sustains you once you're there. The pursuit of fat loss and muscle gain often starts with intensity. People think they need to overhaul everything: strict diets, long workouts, massive lifestyle shifts overnight. But the truth is far more grounded in biology and neuroscience. Real transformation doesn't come from extremes. It comes from repeatable signals. The nervous system thrives on predictability, on patterns it can rely on. When you build those signals into your nutrition, your physiology begins to recalibrate, and the process that once felt impossible begins to feel inevitable. The secret isn't in doing more. It's in doing a few things with precision, consistently. Over time, there are 3 primary levers anyone can pull, no matter their starting point. These are actionable, powerful, and rooted in science. And the first one is protein. Not just eating protein occasionally, but building your nutritional structure around it. Every meal, every day. This matters more than most people realize. Protein doesn't just build muscle. It preserves lean mass during fat loss. It regulates hunger by affecting gut-derived satiety hormones. It increases thermic effect, meaning your body burns more calories digesting it compared to fats or carbohydrates. It's not magic. It's just the biochemical reality of how amino acids interact with the body's systems. Amino acids like leucine, isoleucine, and valine, what we call branch-chain amino acids, serve as direct triggers for MTO, the molecular switch that tells your body to start synthesizing muscle protein. Without enough high-quality protein, roughly 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, you're simply not giving your system the message to build. But even beyond muscle, protein intake shapes hormonal output, cognitive performance, and metabolic flexibility. In other words, if you're not prioritizing protein, you're leaving progress on the table. The second lever is structure, timing, not eating on impulse or skipping meals out of busyness, but actually creating a repeatable framework. This taps into the brain's predictive model of behavior. When you eat at regular intervals, 3 to 4 times per day, with meals spaced every 4 to 5 hours, you engage your circadian rhythms in a way that optimizes nutrient uptake and hormonal balance. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, becomes anticipatory. It begins to rise and fall in alignment with your eating schedule. Cortisol stabilizes. Insulin sensitivity improves in predictable waves. This predictability enhances willpower because the brain isn't spending energy trying to guess what's coming next. This also means front-loading your nutrition, consuming more of your calories earlier in the day when your body is more insulin sensitive and metabolically active. Breakfast and lunch become the foundation for energy, focus, and metabolic momentum. By contrast, heavy eating late at night is more likely to be stored as fat due to reduced glucose tolerance and misaligned hormonal profiles. So structure isn't about rigidity, it's about alignment. It's about turning chaos into rhythm. The third lever is consistency. This one may seem obvious, but it's the one most often abandoned. Because results don't happen immediately, people assume they're doing it wrong. But from a physiological standpoint, consistency isn't just important, it's everything. Think about neuroplasticity. The way the brain and body adapt is through repetition. Repeated signals that say, "This is who I am now. This is the new normal." And in that repetition, systems change. Not just body fat or muscle tissue, but hormonal output, neurotransmitter balance, neural circuitry. You are rewiring not just your behaviors, but your biology. It's important to note that consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means recurrence. Choosing the right meal even when you're tired. Choosing protein even when convenience tempts. Your way. Choosing water over soda. Whole foods over processed. Structure over impulse. Each of these is a micro-decision. And those micro-decisions compound. They create momentum. They shift your identity. And when that shift happens, the effort begins to feel like alignment. Let's take this into a lived example. Imagine someone who wakes up and skips breakfast, grabs fast food at lunch, snacks on sugar mid-afternoon, and overeats late at night. They feel foggy, unfocused, emotionally drained. Their sleep suffers. Their training feels harder than it should. That pattern sends a constant stress signal to the nervous system. That stress shows up in cortisol rhythms, impaired recovery, increased cravings, and fat retention, especially visceral fat. The system is inflamed, dysregulated. Even if they're exercising, they're not optimizing, they're surviving. Now contrast that with a different pattern. They start the day with hydration and a protein-rich meal. Midday, they eat a structured, fiber-dense lunch. They train in the afternoon or early evening, then refuel with lean protein and some slow-digesting carbohydrates. They stop eating a few hours before bed. They sleep better, wake clearer. Their hunger signals normalize, cravings diminish. Their workouts feel stronger, more connected. That pattern, repeated over days and weeks, sends a new signal: safety, efficiency, growth. And the body responds. Consistency also trains the brain to make decisions under low energy conditions. Willpower is a finite resource, but habits are automated. When you build nutritional consistency, you reduce decision fatigue. The prefrontal cortex, which governs executive function, doesn't have to argue with the limbic system over every meal. You eat the same breakfast, prep the same lunch rotation, build go-to dinners. The fewer decisions, the more execution. This frees up mental bandwidth for training, recovery, relationships, and creativity. It's not just about food. It's also where accountability systems help. Simple tools like meal planning, grocery lists, food tracking even temporarily can reinforce behavior and create awareness. Not to micromanage calories, but to build data-driven awareness. When you know what you're eating, when you're eating, and how it affects your energy and performance, you start seeing nutrition as a lever for control, not restriction. That mindset shift is critical. You stop looking at food as the enemy and start seeing it as a strategy. Even cheat meals or flexible eating become less chaotic when they're part of a larger structure. A person who eats nutrient-dense meals 90% of the time can have margin for enjoyment. Their body is resilient. Their system knows what to expect. That one night of eating differently doesn't derail progress because the foundation is strong. The identity is clear, and the nervous system doesn't interpret the deviation as threat. These 3 steps prioritize protein, eat with structure, and repeat with consistency create the internal conditions for sustainable fat loss and lean muscle gain. And they do it by working with the body's systems, not against them. This is not about restriction. It's about communication, about sending the right signals often enough that the body understands the new directive. You are no longer in survival mode. You are in optimization mode. You're not chasing change. You're embodying it. One habit, one decision, one signal at a time. Asterisk, when you begin to understand that the body is a system highly integrated, and constantly adapting, you start to see that transformation isn't about breakthroughs. It's about patterns, about signaling. The nervous system doesn't care about your intentions. It responds to what you do consistently. And the more often you send the right signals, the more your physiology begins to change, just at the level of behavior, but at the level of identity. This is the crux of transformation. Not doing everything at once, but doing the small things repeatedly until they become the default wiring of how you live. The biggest mistake people make when trying to lose fat and gain muscle is over the process. They chase extremes, cut carbs entirely, fast aggressively, train for hours, then they burn out. But the human system doesn't respond well to extremes. It responds to consistency of stimulus. It responds to regularity, rhythm, and feedback. Small, consistent actions send signals to the hypothalamus, to the endocrine system, to the gut-brain axis, telling the body, this is safe, this is sustainable, this is how we live now. The transformation that results is not a sudden an accumulation of precise adjustments that add up. Think about how neuroplasticity works. Neurons that fire together, wire together. The more you repeat an action, the stronger the signal becomes, and the more ingrained that behavior is in your brain's architecture. It's the same with nutrition and body composition. Every time you make a structured meal, every time you choose protein, every time you regulate portion size, you are strengthening the neural pathway for the orbitofrontal cortex, involved in impulse control and valuation, begins to shift its baseline. What once felt difficult, resisting cravings, choosing whole foods, starts to feel automatic. And when that happens, you are no longer pushing yourself toward change. You're being pulled by your identity. This is why massive, short-lived efforts often fail, because they trigger a threat response. You fast too long, the body raises cortisol. You train too hard, the nervous system hits a wall. You cut too many calories, the brain elevates ghrelin and lowers leptin, creating an internal panic signal. We're starving, hold on to fat, so you binge, then restrict, then crash again. And the cycle reinforces a deeper belief that you can't change, that your metabolism is broken, that you lack willpower. But none of that is true. You simply haven't built the neural and metabolic scaffolding for sustainable change yet. Small, consistent actions do something different. They tell the body, this is normal, this is the new default, this is who we are. And the body begins to respond by lowering baseline stress signals. Resting heart rate improves, heart rate variability increases, sleep deepens, digestion stabilizes, hunger cues normalize, and body composition shifts not because you pushed harder, but because you built stability. You created a hormonal and neurological environment where change wasn't a crisis, it was an adaptation. This is where science meets application. We know from research that even a modest increase in protein, just 20 to 30 grams per meal, can shift lean mass retention in a caloric deficit. That fiber intake improves insulin sensitivity. That regular meal timing aligns with circadian biology. That consistent sleep and light exposure regulates leptin and ghrelin. But the science only becomes transformation when it's translated into behavior, and behavior only becomes identity when it's repeated long enough to feel automatic. There's a neural reason for this. The basal ganglia, the brain region involved in habit formation, doesn't respond to intensity. It responds to repetition. So a massive change sustained for 3 days won't register long term. But a small change repeated for 30 days rewires the system. It becomes easier, less effortful. You begin to feel pulled toward the right decisions, instead of constantly resisting the wrong ones. And that internal pull, that gravitational shift, is what makes long-term body transformation possible. The beauty of this approach is that it builds resilience. You're no longer dependent on motivation, which fluctuates. You're relying on systems, on neural circuitry that has been trained to make decisions aligned with your goals. So even when stress hits, even when life gets chaotic, your core patterns remain stable. You default to structure. You default to nourishment. And your body reflects that stability in the way it holds muscle, manages energy, and sheds excess fat. You start to trust yourself, not in a theoretical way, but in a physiological way. Your body becomes a reliable partner. Hunger cues are real. Satiety signals are respected. Training sessions feel productive, not punishing. Recovery improves. Sleep feels restorative. And in that feedback loop, confidence builds. You're no longer chasing change, you're embodying it. Living from it. This isn't just a goal, it's a way of being. What this requires is not perfection, but presence. An ability to observe your own patterns, make micro-adjustments, and stay with the process. If you miss a workout, it's not failure, it's a single data point. If you eat off-plan, it's not sabotage, it's information. The nervous system doesn't need perfection. It needs rhythm, repetition, predictability. And the more you provide that through simple, repeatable habits, the more your physiology aligns with your psychology. Even your metabolism begins to shift. Muscle becomes more metabolically active. Insulin sensitivity improves. Fat oxidation increases. You become a more efficient engine, not by hacking your biology, but by aligning with it. And this is the central idea. You don't force change. Allow it. You facilitate it. You create the internal and external environment that makes change the most likely outcome. And then you follow through. Small, consistent actions look like drinking 500 milliliters of water upon waking, eating a protein-rich breakfast, packing a prepared meal, turning off screens an hour before bed, training for 45 minutes, 4 days a week. These are not glamorous, but they are powerful. Each one sends a signal. Each one reinforces a pattern. Each one tells your nervous system, this is who I am. And over time, that identity becomes undeniable. You no longer need to convince yourself. You feel it. You see it. Your physiology proves it. You become someone who eats with intention, trains with focus, sleeps with purpose, recovers with care. You build, slowly, the kind of system that doesn't just produce fat loss and muscle gain, but sustains it effortlessly, because it's no longer something you do, it's who you are. Asterisk, and so, we arrive at the deeper truth. The pursuit of losing fat and gaining muscle isn't just about shaping your body, it's about reshaping your life. It's not just physical, and it's certainly not cosmetic. It's neurological, it's emotional, it's metabolic. It's about how consistently you can send the right signals to your brain and body signals that tell your system. We are no longer surviving, we are optimizing. You begin this process not by doing everything at once, but by doing a few key things consistently. You anchor your meals in protein, because that's how you preserve and build lean mass. You create a structure, not because it's rigid, but because the brain thrives on predictability. You repeat those habits, not perfectly, but persistently, because your biology is listening for patterns. When those signals are steady, when nutrition, rest, movement, and intention come together, you create a new internal environment. Your hormones recalibrate, your hunger cues stabilize, your energy becomes sustainable, and you start to feel different, not because you look different yet, but because the system is working with you, not against you. This is the kind of change that doesn't rely on willpower. It doesn't depend on motivation. It's deeper, it's system-based. It's rooted in how the brain and body co-regulate behavior and physiology over time. It's why we talk about neuroplasticity, because with enough consistency, the brain itself begins to change. The decisions that once felt hard begin to feel automatic. Your internal reward system adapts. Cravings fade. Clarity rises. You become someone who is no longer negotiating with your goals. You are living them without resistance. This process doesn't demand perfection. It invites presence. It asks you to observe yourself, to understand your biology, to notice how certain foods sharpen your focus while others fog it, to notice how sleep, light, hydration, and breath all shape your discipline, your hunger, your resilience. When you pay attention to the inputs, you begin to see how predictable the outputs are. And that predictability is empowering. You no longer feel like change is out of reach, or reserved for someone more disciplined or genetically gifted. You realize it's biology, it's neuroscience, it's adaptation, and it's available to you through action, through rhythm, through choice. You start making those choices not from a place of guilt or urgency, but from alignment, because they feel good, because they reinforce who you're becoming. So as you step forward into this process, remind yourself, you're not chasing transformation. You're training for it. You're practicing it. One rep at a time, one meal, one breath, one act of clarity. And those small, intentional choices, they accumulate. They hotwire. They elevate. Change isn't an event. It's a system. Build that system with consistency, and your body will follow. Your mind will follow. Your life will follow.